I made this mistake the other day and I thought I have to tell you because you don't want to be making the same mistake. And this is a pretty common one. So what happened was something happened and I had to push a deadline for a task forward. So I told my team, hey, we got to now get this done quickly. Yeah, they agreed and we agreed. So an hour later, I get the output. I thought, amazing, right? That was fast. And then I take a look and I realize, wait a second, these parts aren't even fixed. This is not client ready. This part, did we even think through it? And I got all upset. But my team was looking at me like, what? You wanted it done quickly. We got it done really quickly. This is what I call the invisible drag. Probably one of the worst failures you can have in communication because it doesn't seem like a failure and yet the results push you back. To me, quickly is fast and client ready, right? But that's not what I said. I just said quickly. So the team heard it and said, okay, let's just get this done. Vicky needs this now. The sharpest communicators and thinkers do this one thing before they let the conversation move on. And that is to, one, identify which key idea, key concept, key word tend to have multiple meanings in them. And then they define it for the room. For our context, this is what I mean. Because without doing that, what you'll have happen is then people nod, people agree, and then time goes on and you realize, wait, we were going down completely different paths. Now that time is wasted, that effort is wasted, and we got to regroup again. And this problem gets worse the more senior you become. Because if you don't have this habit, people are not going to actively ask you, oh, what do you mean by quickly, right? It just sounds like such a silly idea. So what they do is they nod, they take the concept with them, and they figure it out on their own. And if you don't give them the right context, then yes, you're going to end up with an output that you're not happy and everyone's frustrated as to, well, we all agreed what went wrong. First, let me give you a few words and see what comes to mind as I say them. Quickly, right? Does this mean within the hour? To some people, it means by the end of the day. To some people, it's like by the end of the week. That's plenty quick. Priority. To some people, this means, okay, this is a priority. I'm dropping everything else I'm doing and focusing on this. To other people, it's like, okay, this is a priority, one of many, and I've got a list. I'm going to move it up the list, and hopefully we have, a couple of things going on so we don't drop the ball on the key priorities. What about effort? Some people hear this and it's like, okay, head down, more hours, more time. I'm going to grind until this thing is done. For others, effort means, okay, now I got to spend a bit more time thinking about what's the right path so I can get to a better outcome. So whether you focus on input, whether you focus on output, really depends. Such common words, and yet they hold so many meaning within them. We just talked about a few, but as you're thinking it, you probably have different versions from what I just said. And that's why it's invisible drag, right? That everyone is nodding, we have agreement. But who thinks to ask, oh, what does quickly actually mean? What do you mean by effort, right? And this is why we have to start anchoring the idea within the context. This brings us to concept anchoring. There's multiple ways of doing concept anchoring, but here I'll share with you one of the easiest way, which I call the two-part split. This means when you use a key concept, make sure to split it in halves. One half is about what you don't want, and the other half is about what you do want. Say, let's push on this, right? By push, I don't mean stay here until 2 a.m. and just put in raw work. I mean, push the quality that we can deliver within the time allowed. Or let's come up with a problem statement. And by problem, I don't mean the surface problem with the symptoms. I mean, can we find the structural problem that's causing all these symptoms? Or something as simple as, okay, let's have a meeting about this. And in the meeting, I don't mean we're just going to share information and talk, right? The goal is the decision. So bring information that can help us make that decision. It's so simple, yet all of a sudden it's so clear to the other person what needs to be done. For my leaders out there, this will really resonate, right? Sometimes you just think, okay, but my teammate is a great person, but why are they just so careless? Or why don't they think for themselves? Like, what is thinking for themselves? They don't have the same context as you do. So sometimes all it takes is for the leader to share a little bit more context, as it is with using AI, our smart intern needs a bit of context. With real humans, you need to also share context. Now, the next natural question becomes, well, how do I split it into twos, right? Of course, it's easier if you have experience, like, oh, if I say quickly, usually people sacrifice quality, so I need to make sure to tell them it's not about sacrificing quality. You got to take enough time to make sure quality is there. But with other concepts, right? We're working on this problem. How do I split it into two? Or here's a decision. Well, the decision's you're really unclear, but how do I split it into two? When that happens, or when you don't have experience, luckily there are 10 traps that are really common in the workplace when it comes to concepts. And so I'll share two here that are very common and really easy to use. And I'll give you the rest in the free downloadable one if you're curious. So first is about time horizon. And this comes because there's always time pressure at work. And so whenever you talk about something, you have to clarify the time horizon. Do I mean now or do I mean somewhere down the line, right? Do I mean short term? Do I mean long term? And let's say with a decision, the decision is to get the result now. Okay, when we know that, that's what we need to do versus the decision is not about today, are we going to see ROI, but in a year, are we going to see ROI? Okay, now that just opens up people to think about, it doesn't have to happen today, but we need to hit something in a year's time. So using time horizon and helping people think through when something needs to be achieved by is really helpful. The second thing that brings immediate clarity, and is one that I always like to think through, is the levels of analysis. Right? When you're working on a project, when you're working on a problem, hey, everyone, let's come up with the problem statement. You'll notice that people are naturally working at different levels depending on their experience, depending on what they know more of. So you might have, UI UX team focusing on the customer problem. You might have people in the strategy department thinking about the system. You might have, your frontline people thinking about at their individual level what is going wrong. So one way to get everyone onto the same page is to talk about the levels of analysis. For example, let's come up with the problem statement and let's focus not only on the customer level, but also the market level. And now everyone who's thinking through a problem now know, okay, how can I connect what I see now to the customer? How can I take what I know now and connect it to what's happening in the broader market? All of a sudden, you've helped them take their information and make it meaningful to contribute to this project. And it also brings more clarity to everyone thinking, where are we going with this? Like, what is the end goal, right? By sharing which levels of analysis are appropriate for this context, it really helps get everyone on board towards the same thing. So using levels of analysis is another great way to help anchor what exactly we're talking about. If you want the other 8 traps that lead to invisible drag, check out the link down below. I really noticed that the sharpest thinker and communicator are not the ones that speak a lot or the ones that speak too little, right? It's the one that's focused on clarifying and aligning everyone in the conversation so that everyone is actually talking about the same things. All you have to do is anchor the concept, split the definition, and watch everyone see the invisible become visible. All right, give that a try and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.